Oh.
E.T. phone home?
E.T. phone home.
November 1982. Steven Spielberg's E.T.'s 4-month stretch at number 1 on the US box office was coming to an end, and so was Iron Maiden's Beast on the Road world tour, and so was Clive Burr's time behind the kit for Iron Maiden, due to personal and tour schedule problems. Burr was and remains an important chapter in Iron Maiden's history. 20 years later, in 2002, the band discovered that Burr was suffering from multiple sclerosis. Rod Smallwood and the lads decided that something had to be done, so they put together a fundraiser and played 3 nights in March at London's Brixton Academy, donating the £250,000 plus profits from the concert and merchandising into a newly formed Clive Burr Multiple Sclerosis Trust Fund. The fund also received generous donations from EMI and publisher BMG Music from the commercial single re-release of Run to the Hills and Number of the Beast, which would again grace the UK singles chart. Bruce Dickinson described Burr as the best drummer Maiden ever had.
And that's not taking anything away from Nico. Technically, Nico's probably a far more competent drummer than Clive. It's just that Clive had this incredible feel, and you can't learn that. And I regret that he wasn't given more time to try to sort himself out.
In 2012, Burr no doubt took some energy from Number of the Beast hitting number 3 on the UK singles chart, a good 30 years after its release. Despite this, and despite all of the funds that had been raised to support Burr and MS research, he would succumb to complications arising from the disease in 2013. He was 56. Enter Nico McBrain, a seasoned drummer who had been kicking around with established acts like Pat Travers, the Streetwalkers, and French political meddlers Trust, among many others, for a good decade before joining Iron Maiden. Interestingly though, McBrain already had a yet unknown association with the band. His dad had once been part of the circle of friends that congregated around notorious 60s East End villains like the infamous Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie. As Dave Murray tells it,
my father used to drink with the Krays at a pub called the Blind Beggar in Whitechapel. I don't know if he ever got up to any shenanigans with them or what, but funnily enough, now Nico's father used to hang out with them as well, and when he and my dad met up years later at a Maiden gig, they sat there talking about the old days for hours.
Known for his powerful playing style, dynamic stage presence, and infectious positive enthusiasm, Nico's arrival breathed new life into the band, and his tight and precise drumming became an essential component of Iron Maiden's sound. He would quickly become a beloved member of the Iron Maiden family. Ozzy Osbourne might have released an album called No Rest for the Wicked years later, but it was Iron Maiden who were truly living these ethos at the time. Fresh from a massive world tour, and having already released 3 albums in the prior 30 months, the band flew to the Bahamas to record their next album at Compass Point Studios. Why the Bahamas? As Rod Smallwood tells it,
for tax reasons, we were still trying to save every penny. The problem with being a rock band is you're either earning a lot of money or you're earning nothing. And no matter how well you've been doing one year, you never know what's going to happen the next. It's not like a normal business where you can fairly safely predict what the figures will be over the next 2 or 3 years. In the music business, you're only ever as good as your last record.
It was a pretty bare-bones setup in the Bahamas, but at least it was sunny, and the band cranked out 9 tracks that would go on to feature on what Kerrang readers at the time voted the greatest metal album of all time, ahead of its predecessor Number of the Beast in second spot, Peace of Mind. All killer and no filler, Peace of Mind featured fan favourites like Where Eagles Dare, Flight of Icarus, Revelations, and of course, The Trooper. Of Revelations, the only people that didn't like it were religious fundamentalists in the US, who were still accusing Maiden of being Satanists. They took specific objection at a Bible verse from the Book of Revelations appearing on the album sleeve. Dogmatists aside, Peace of Mind, released on 16 May 1983, rocketed to the top of the charts, hitting number 3 in the UK, number 8 in Germany, number 10 in Canada, number 17 in Australia, and in the United States, number 13. A a personal best for the band in the country. The album would go on to be certified platinum in the US. The subsequent 6-month tour across Europe and America took in 139 shows and culminated with 2 shows at the Dortmund Rock Pop Festival in Germany, where Maiden headlined over an all-star cast that included the likes of Def Leppard, Ozzy Osbourne, The Scorpions, Quiet Riot, and appearing under Iron Maiden on the bill for the first time, Judas Priest. A signal that Maiden were racing ahead of their fellow British metalers. While you might have expected Maiden to be consummate professionals by this point, the evidence seemed to suggest otherwise. According to a reporter from Kerrang! Magazine, who was backstage after a performance in Dortmund,
Bruce was brilliant, getting utterly smashed after his grade at performance, pissing in garbage cans on the mixing desk, throwing bottles at hotel walls, attempting to leap out of cars at 65, and to top it all, getting his privates out during a hilarious Quiet Riot photo session.
Earlier in 1983, during the Memorial Day weekend in the United States, Judas Priest had graced the stage of the iconic US Festival in San Bernardino, California. 670,000 people turned up that weekend to see the likes of Priest, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Van Halen perform. The latter reportedly receiving $1.5 million for their services, enough to buy about 12 houses in LA at the time. With 1983 drawing to a close, and fresh from watching Maiden headline the Rock Pop Festival, Priest was putting the finishing touches on their follow-up to Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith. Recorded again in Ibiza and released in January of 1984, a year in which the same Van Halen would release their high watermark, Defenders of the Faith was stylistically a continuation of its predecessor. And while it didn't feature any standout tracks that feature regularly in Priest's setlist today, it was a solid album and would go on to hit the top 20 album chart in the UK and US, where it was certified platinum. The album, perhaps, is most remembered by some for contributing a song to the Parents Music Resource Centre's, or the PMRC's, Filthy 15 list. The PMRC was an advocacy group that focused on music censorship in the 1980s and was run by Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife. Gore took the lyrics of a song on the album to be corrupting to America's youth. The song, Eat Me Alive, which featured bondage-inspired lyrics contributed by none other than, surprise surprise, Rob Halford. While KK insists it was just a bit of fun, the song landed at number 3 on the Filthy 15 list, with Gore stating that it was about oral sex at gunpoint. The lyrics seem quite tame and abstract by today's wet-ass pussy standards. One passage reads, "Wrapped tight around me like a second flesh hot skin, cling to my body as the ecstasy begins. Your wild vibrations got me shooting from the hip. Crazed and insatiable, let rip." In response to the allegations, Priest recorded a song called Parental Guidance that would wind up on their next album. The incident, though, would be an ominous sign of things to come. In all, Priest would play 125 shows on the subsequent Metal Conqueror tour, taking in the US, Europe, and Japan. But as Judas Priest were beginning to wind up their tour in September of 1984, Iron Maiden were about to drop what is considered by most fans to this day to be their own high watermark, their best work, and they were about to fly into the stratosphere. In the next episode of Battle of the Bands, Iron Maiden travel back in time to ancient Egypt.